So today we'll be discussing the wisdom of Taoism. Last lecture we looked at various different ways in which people have tried to harness the power, the force of the Tao. And in this week's lecture we'll look at how people have tried to do that in terms of wisdom, gaining wisdom for living one's life. In particular, we'll take a look at two major concepts. One is Yin-Yang and the other is this idea of Wu-Wei. So what we said was that when Lao Tzu looked at the world, the way he experienced the world was one in which he realized that there was a natural intelligence to nature. There was a natural intelligence to how things operated, and that things seemed to flow, that there's a natural ebb and flow to reality, sort of like how a river flows. There seems to be a natural pattern to it. One way to think about or to see the Tao is to see a reality comprised of opposites that aren't really opposing forces as much as complementary forces. This is the notion of yin-yang. And when we looked at when you looked at the readings on page 141, there was a little parable about the farmer whose horse ran away, and there's a little background on Zhuangzi's wife. Both of those provide insights that are related to this concept of yin-yang. And we'll discuss this during our live conference sessions at the end of the week. So I'm hoping that you would have read this or have your textbook with us when we do the live conference. But yin-yang, what is this? The principle of yin-yang is the principle that the world or reality is composed of a harmony of opposites, that there are opposing forces that are in balance with one another. Take a look at the symbol. What stands out to you about the symbol? One thing you may notice is that one leads into the other. Where one begins, the other ends, and where one ends, the other begins. Another thing you might want to notice is that within each of these various colors is contained an element of the other. So in this sense, maybe you can intuitively get a feel for what's trying to be conveyed in this notion of yin-yang. Now, just as a formality, I should make note that yin-yang is itself a concept, is itself a term. It's not a yin and then a yang. The principle is yin-yang. And it's appropriate, since what's being espoused here is the notion that though it feels as if there are opposing forces in reality, even though it feels as if there is something going in one direction, that is an opposite of another direction, what's really happening is that both opposites are always coexisting, that the source of one opposite is always inherently within the other opposite. So we can summarize it as follows. The whole of reality is comprised of seemingly opposing forces, but these are not in conflict necessarily. Instead, they are complementary. So there's no black without white. And think about that for a second. Would you understand the concept of what black is if you didn't have a concept of white? There's no hot without cold, meaning having an understanding of hot only exists because you have an understanding of cold. You need that opposite to contrast in order to have meaning for something. Similarly with the ideas of short and long, similarly with the ideas of creation and destruction. Instead of seeing them as either or sorts of things in the world, they are opposites of one thing. And this is a sort of philosophy that we're exposed to when we discuss Hinduism, the notion of non-duality. Right? Within Advaita Vedanta, there was this belief that though we feel as if there is a I, Atman, that is separate from our authentic self, Brahman, that the reality is they're one and the same. If you remember that discussion, maybe you can relate it to this sort of discussion. In a very similar sense, the principle of yin-yang is pointing out the idea that though we feel as if the world is made up of opposing forces, that is really just another way of saying that um, reality is really a harmony of things that seem different. Now, when we often hear people discuss yin-yang in a very practical sense, when people are, when Taoists or even just folks who are imbued with or who are in the culture use the term, sometimes they'll associate yin and yang with various aspects of their experiences. So yin is often thought of as negative, while yang is thought of as positive. Yin is thought of as passive, while yang is thought of as active. Yin is thought of as feminine, while yang is thought of as masculine. Yin is thought of as earthly, while yang is thought of as heavenly, etc., etc. And again, this is an everyday sort of usage. This is kind of how people have taken the mythology, the experience of this principle, and have tried to apply it to what they go through on a daily basis. But at the heart of this is the notion that you can't really have one without the other. You can't have the feminine without the idea of the masculine. They define each other. You can't have an idea of night without the idea of day. Knowing what night is dependent on knowing what day is. And which means that even though sometimes we want all of one thing and then we go after all of that, it might be that we need to do the complete opposite. That what we need is more of a balance in order to make the situation better. Chapter 2 of the Tao Te Ching. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Before and after follow each other. Let's take a look at this first part. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. What does that refer to, you think? When people see some things as good, other things become bad. There is a sense that by making the judgment, we've created the opposite. By making some sort of categorization, by making some sort of label, we create the opposite of that judgment. We create the opposite of that label because they can't exist without the other. Similarly, being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Though we want things to be easy, easy can't exist without the difficult. Though we want some things to be high, high cannot exist without the low. And maybe our difficulty in life is forgetting this fact. So that when there's something we want, we forget that what's also necessary is the opposite of that in life. So yin yang, we can think of it as the two faces of the Tao, but it's still all the Tao. So when we talk about harnessing this wisdom, how do we apply this sort of approach to life so that we can live better? This is the principle of Wu-Wei. And this is what you read about for today in the Star Wars article, and the whole notion of Obi-Wan Kenobi's conversation with Luke. So discussing Wu-Wei and how it's applicable to your life is the homework assignment for this week. So let's delve into this concept. Have you ever gotten in your own way? You tried to do something, you wanted to achieve something, and you actually just messed it up. You got in your own way. Have you ever thought too much about a decision? There was a choice you had to make, and you kind of overthought the choice, or you thought you put too much effort or worried too much about making the choice that you actually suffered because of it. Maybe you missed an opportunity because you were too preoccupied or too stressed to see it. There's an opportunity for you to do something fantastic, great, fun, but you didn't see it. You didn't take advantage of it because you were too worried about something else, or maybe too preoccupied with all the possibilities of of this choice that you ended up not making it? Have you ever done something through brute force, just kept hammering away at it, and later realized that there was a much easier way of approaching the problem? On the flip side, have you ever felt like things just came naturally to you? That you didn't really have to put much effort, you didn't really have to think too hard about it, it just came to you. Things just came and flowed through you. Have you ever felt as if something just came through you rather than by you, where instead of you deciding to do something, the actions just like came out of you naturally? Have you ever felt as if you were one with an activity, that you felt as if you're completely lost in the activity? You were so engaged in doing something that you lost track of time, you forgot to eat. Have these experiences ever occurred to you? Lastly, have you ever felt as if everything was just going right? That in this weird moment in your life, things were just happening well? Well, this is the goal or the intention, at least the latter parts of Wu-Wei. And the earlier parts are examples of when we don't follow the principle of Wu-Wei. So what's Wu-Wei? One way to think about Wu-Wei is to think about the first time you've ever gone swimming, or the first time you saw somebody else go swimming, or I should say that differently. Or maybe you can remember watching somebody go into the water for the first time. When people have difficulty floating, what's the reason? Here they are, they're thrown in the pool, or if they're unfortunate, they're thrown into the ocean for the first time. Now, the body naturally knows how to float. The body naturally floats. So why do some people have difficulty floating when put into the pool for the first time? When we're stressed, when we're fighting against obstacles, we often feel like we have to be active. We feel like we have to do something to combat the situation. That's like the natural approach to a problem. Wu Wei is the notion that maybe what we need to do is let go. Maybe what we need to do is do the opposite of what we think we should do. So here we are struggling in the water. The reason most people struggle is because they're moving, because they're tense, right? If they simply let go and allow their body to do what it naturally does, they may notice that they naturally float. So, Wu Wei literally means non-action. Wu Wei is the principle, is the approach by which we can be in flow with the Tao. So from chapter 63, it's acting without doing. It's work, but without effort. So you're participating, but you're not pushing. So it means to not force things, to let go of the need for continual control. And it's that continual want for control that often keeps us tense, that keeps us stressed. The most popular way of thinking about Wu Wei is simply to go with the flow. And you've probably heard of this sort of phrase. So how do you find yourself in line with the Tao? You don't force things. You let go of having to control everything. And what you might naturally see is you naturally start to align yourself with the natural flow of the Tao. And this goes back to the whole analogy of the river. If we think of the Tao as the natural flow, the ebbs and flows of life, the natural intelligence to life, how can you best take advantage of that river? Do you take your craft, your boat, and do you paddle upstream? You can, but you'll notice that it's much harder. To take advantage of the flow of the river, you paddle with the currents. And sometimes the best way to go with the currents is to simply let go and allow the currents to take you. This is the idea of Wu Wei. To align yourself with the Tao, to be in harmony with the natural movement, natural intelligence of the universe. Not thinking that we have to always do things on our own. Not thinking that we have to control every aspect of our lives. And instead, letting go so that we can take advantage of the natural intelligence that knows where it is we want to go and how to get there, how to best get there. So let's think about other examples of Wu Wei. Have you ever had this experience where you were trying to sleep? And let's say you wanted to get up at a certain hour to get ready for work or to get ready to go to school, and you try to go to bed early. So let's say you go to bed like 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night. And then you're trying to sleep, you're trying to sleep, you're trying to sleep. You open your eyes, take a look at the clock, thinking that many hours have passed and it's only 11:30. You go, okay, I'm going to try to sleep again. So you try to sleep, you try to sleep, you try to sleep. You open your eyes, take a look at the clock, 12:45. And now you start to get anxious. You start to get worried that you're not going to be able to go to sleep. So here you are, you try to close your eyes again, try to go to sleep, try to go to sleep, try to go to sleep, and then you open your eyes, look at the clock. Oh my goodness, it's only 1:15. And you are freaking out, thinking that there's no way now that you can go to sleep. Well, let's think about this for the moment. Your body naturally knows how to sleep. You take a look at the animal kingdom, all animals naturally know how to sleep. But here we are struggling. What's the cause of that? One way to think about it is that we're trying to control the situation. We're trying to control sleeping. We want to force ourselves to enter this sort of state. Wu-Wei means letting that go, not stressing out about trying to control a bodily process that we can naturally do. And in fact, if you've ever tried to do the opposite, if you've ever tried to stay awake, let's say you're trying to watch a movie, if your body is tired, have you noticed that it will naturally go to sleep? That you'll have a hard time keeping your eyes open during the movie? And why is that? It's because that while you're watching the movie, you're in this relaxed state. You're not trying to control or dictate to your body something that it automatically knows how to do. This is the concept of Wu-Wei. It's a concept that Taoists will try to apply to all aspects of their lives, their relationships, their careers, various other life goals, aligning ourselves with the flow of the Tao to live life more naturally, as opposed to try to fight and control things that naturally will occur. Think about breathing. Your body knows how to breathe. You don't need to train it to breathe. You don't need to control your breathing. Have you tried to do that? Have you worried about breathing? What you might notice is that you make your breathing more difficult, worrying about your breath. Wu-Wei is about letting it go, letting your body naturally do what it knows how to do. In this case, breathe. So within the reading for today, we saw the following. Obi-Wan says, "Use the Force, Luke." Luke looks up, then starts to look back into the targeting device. He has second thoughts. Obi-Wan, "Let go, Luke." You can see the parallel with chapter 48. True mastery can be gained by letting things go their own way. It can't be gained by interfering. So when Luke has doubts, right, those doubts are interfering with his natural instinct. Those doubts are interfering with the natural way that's moving him to do what he's supposed to do. So, Wu-Wei can be summarized as follows. It's the means of living simply. We can overcomplicate our lives, right? And that overcomplication often gets us out of the natural flow of it. Wu-Wei means having patience. Because when you're impatient, you want to control things and force them to occur faster than they may naturally occur, which causes you to suffer, which is equivalent to trying to paddle upstream. Wu-Wei means going then with the natural flow of the Tao. So when we talk about harnessing the wisdom of the Tao, Wu-Wei is the approach by which we are taking advantage of how reality is comprised of opposites. Wu-Wei is the way in which we realize that things shouldn't be all one way, that there is a complementary opposite way that we also need to take into account. So that when we think we should push, maybe what we need to do is lay back and pull. When we think we should force things, maybe what we need to do is let go and be patient. Wu-Wei is the philosophy that gives us the approach so that we can find ourselves taking advantage of the inherent vitality, the inherent power of this pattern of the world, right? This pattern of reality. There's probably not a better analogy than surfing for this. When you surf, what you're trying to do is you're trying to be one with the wave. You're trying to align yourself with the wave so that you can enjoy riding the wave. You're taking advantage of the force of it. Wu-Wei is the idea that in order to do that, you have to let go of trying to control the wave, right? There's no point in trying to force the wave to do what you want to do. What you do is you simply ride the wave. However, in life, when we experience ups and downs like waves, we often try to fight the wave. We often try to control the wave instead of simply riding it, instead of simply letting go and feeling it so that we can best navigate through it. We can see this in athletes, or anytime somebody says they're in the zone. Maybe you've worked and time just flew by because you're so engaged in your work. In those situations, you probably weren't over controlling what you were doing. Maybe you participated in some sort of artistic endeavor like writing or singing, and you find yourself completely lost in the activity. You worked, you put effort, but you didn't force things to happen. The words just came out of your fingers. You just felt lost in the music, right? There's work involved. You sang. There's work involved. You wrote, but it wasn't the type of work that was forced. Work that you consciously struggled to make happen. It just happened. This is the idea of Wu-Wei. So if you're writing a paper, maybe the best idea isn't to stress out about the paper or to hammer the paper, but simply let go and see what happens when you're relaxed while writing the paper. When athletes talk about being in the zone, they'll talk about losing themselves in the moment. They'll talk about how the basket seems so much bigger, how the glove looks so much bigger. They'll talk about their perception of reality changing slightly. Taoists would say that they practice Wu-Wei. They let go. They weren't overly thinking about it. They weren't overly trying to control what was happening and just let the actions flow out of it. So let's summarize some other key ideas from Taoism that we can see in the Tao Te Ching that we have not been able to get to yet. And these are rather important. Within the Tao Te Ching, we get the sense that there's no real absolute moral judgment. That what we think of as being absolutely wrong may really have its place if you consider the bigger picture, right? Yin and Yang. We consider that that reality is made up of both opposites. When something goes wrong, there might be a way to see how it's actually beneficial. The Tao Te Ching has no mention of an afterlife, right? Though within religious practices, within the spiritual approach to harnessing the Tao, some people may talk about this. Within the Tao Te Ching itself, there is no discussion of the afterlife. There seems to be much more of an emphasis on how to live life well now. Death, then, is written as a natural phenomenon. It's something that naturally occurs. And what we see with Taoism, and maybe you can see this with the other Eastern religions we've looked at, is there seems to be a great appreciation for nature. So the philosophies of life that we've taken a look at seem to parallel our experience of the natural world or how nature actually works. So it's no wonder then that within Taoism, humans aren't necessarily treated as individuals or entities that are separate from nature. We are part of this grand harmony of nature. We're a part of this big balance of all the different elements of nature. Maybe you can relate this in essence to what we learned about in Hinduism. The Tao Te Ching seems to value humility, naturalness, and non-aggression. Within the Tao Te Ching, we hear through the various chapters this message that the characteristics that will most allow us to live life well, right, those virtues, are these: not to be caught up with any sense of self-righteousness, not to get caught up in any uh, uh, sort of need to compete with one another for status. Instead, we're taught to live life simply, to value to value harmony as opposed to conflict. So let's summarize Taoism. What is the ultimate for Taoism? Well, the ultimate reality is the Tao. What's the human condition? Well, it seems to be one where we are often in disharmony with the Tao. And the analogy again would be one in which we are fighting the currents of the Tao as if we're trying to paddle upstream. So, how do we transcend this human condition? Within Taoism, we're told that we need to find a way to better align ourselves with the natural flow of reality. And we do that by practicing Wu-Wei, by practicing action without effort, practicing letting go of having to control what we experience. So, what sorts of takeaways might you have, or might you glean from our discussion on Taoism? It might be about the power of letting go. And maybe you can relate to that with various experiences in your life. Maybe it might be easier to let something go instead of trying to force it to happen. Maybe it's this idea that we can live life gracefully, kind of how a dancer can gracefully use their body and move efficiently through space. Maybe we can do the same thing with life. We can move efficiently through life, gracefully through life.